We got a great slate of games. I think a really underrated slate tomorrow as SEC action picks back up. This is our weekend shoot-around that we do each and every single Friday before SEC play begins. So without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and get into it. We start in Athens, Georgia. The Georgia Bulldogs host the 5th-ranked Tennessee Volunteers. This is a noon tip in Athens on ESPN2. Georgia's been a really, really nice story early on in this season, guys, or throughout this season. A team that was obviously picked near the bottom of the league. And it's funny with Georgia. I feel like Georgia, they don't get a lot of credit because if it's not football, folks look and say, okay, well, Georgia doesn't really care, right? They don't invest in other sports like they do football. All of a sudden, you look at this team. They got a couple of veteran guys on this group. Round ball starting to matter in Athens again. Round ball starting to matter. Tennessee licking their wounds coming off that tough loss against Mississippi State, guys. They have to go back on the road, right? There's no such thing as an easy road win in league play. I do think Tennessee, though, guys, I think their physicality, I think they're going to bounce back in the right way. I think Rick Barnes will have his team ready to go. I'm taking the Tennessee Volunteers on the road here, but I'm really curious. And what I hate, too, about basketball, we don't get these spreads and we don't get these lines until day of the game, if you will. So I'm curious to see what this spread is at. I'm very, very curious because, guys, looking at this slate of games, we don't have a ranked-on-ranked matchup. But I think what that causes is I think we're going to see some upsets. I think it's going to be a really, really fun day of college basketball in the SEC. But I think Tennessee, who I think will more than likely, they should be the favorite, I think they'll take care of business on the road and bounce back from that loss against Mississippi State. To Oxford we go. The Ole Miss Rebels, speaking of bouncing back, they got a really big bounce-back win this week against Florida in the midweek. They host Vanderbilt, a 1 o'clock tip-off on SEC Network. Like I mentioned, guys, I think there will be upsets on this card. I really do. I don't see one coming to Oxford, though. Vanderbilt's terrible. I mean, Jerry Stackhouse, we talked to Jeff Goodman yesterday. Good coach when he has talent. The problem is he can't recruit the talent and he can't retain the talent for whatever reason, right? Vanderbilt is flat out just not good. Ole Miss, I think, at home, it's one of the tougher venues, very underrated venue, is the Ole Miss Rebels basketball arena, if you will. 1 o'clock tip, SEC Network. I think Ole Miss will get the job done here. I think they'll keep up the hot shooting, guys. I think they shot 60% in that game against Florida. I do have Ole Miss getting the win. I don't know how many conference games, guys, Vandy's going to win, but I think you can count it on one hand. Like, they might sneak up and bite somebody twice or maybe 3 times this year. It's not going to be Ole Miss in this ball game, though. Texas A&M hosts the 6th-ranked Kentucky Wildcats. This is a 2 o'clock tip-off on ESPN. The 6th-ranked Cats, guys, enter this game against A&M undefeated in conference play. Got a really gritty win earlier in the week against the Missouri Tigers. Texas A&M, guys, they are struggling. They are limping into this ball game. Do not sleep on Buzz Williams' squad, guys. Don't sleep on them. We saw Texas A&M do this song and dance last year. They catch fire. I don't know if this is going to be the game that it happens, but I'm just saying I won't be shocked when it does. Meanwhile, Kentucky, a young team, very talented team. They've meshed well. They've gelled well early. Going on the road, guys, this is my first big upset. I'm going Texas A&M over Kentucky in this game. I think the Aggies get off the schneid. I think they find a way to get the job done. Again, can't afford to go 0-3 in SEC play, guys. And here's the thing. You got to pick some upsets like this. You just have to, because conference play is going to be wacky. It's going to be crazy, guys. I could see a scenario in which the winner of the SEC or the first place team in the SEC is a 4 or 5 loss team. I think it's going to be that type of year in the league. I got Texas A&M pulling off the upset, what would feel like a bit of a shocker against the Kentucky Wildcats. I think Buzz Williams' team, I think Wade Taylor has a really big day for the Aggies. I think Texas A&M finds a way to get the job done, guys. We go to Como. Mizzou taking on South Carolina, a 3:30 tip on SEC Network. Missouri, yet another team, guys, staring at 0-2 in SEC play. They need to get off the schneid. They got to get off the mat. Meanwhile, South Carolina, they're looking to rebound and bounce back in a big way after they got their teeth kicked in the second half in Tuscaloosa a couple of days ago. held Alabama close up to halftime, was a 1-point game. Alabama just runs away with it. South Carolina, who steps up outside of Michie Johnson for the Gamecocks? I think that's the big question. You know 5 is going to show up day in, day out, game in, game out. Who else around him? Is it Studi on the outside? Is it BJ Mack down low? Is it Talon Cooper? Is it somebody else for South Carolina? Meanwhile, guys, for Mizzou, again, you can't afford to fall to 0-3 in SEC play, okay? And Dennis Gates' team has been one of the most disappointing teams thus far, especially in conference play. I'm riding with Mizzou in this one. Again, it's just tough to go on the road and win. And I think this South Carolina team, I still like what Lamont Paris is doing. But, guys, we knew as they navigated non-conference, they got into SEC play, you're going to hit some bumps in the road. And, again, I think a really hungry, desperate Mizzou team, a really physical Mizzou team, I think they will find a way to get the job done, to salvage a victory. I've got the Missouri Tigers. Will this be an upset? I'm curious the spread on this one because you look at the ESPN, indicators or whatever, they heavily favor Mizzou, which feels like, what do you make of that really? What does that really mean? I think Mizzou on the home floor, South Carolina's got to find somebody outside of Michie Johnson. Do the shooting woes carry over into Como? I think they may. And again, I think Missouri, a desperate 0-2 in the conference team, I think they get the W. They beat South Carolina tomorrow afternoon. Florida taking on Arkansas in Gainesville. This a 4:00 tip on ESPN. Guys, I don't care who Arkansas is playing. I can't pick the Hogs. I don't trust Arkansas right now. Eric Musselman's team, they're lost. I mean, this team is lost. They're as talented as anybody in the SEC, but they are just completely lost, right? Picked Arkansas to pull the upset a week ago against Auburn. They lose that game by 30 points or so. They go lose at Georgia. Florida, meanwhile, you're 0-2 in SEC play as well. Again, this is another team. You cannot fall to 0-3. You're desperate. Had a tough loss against Kentucky. And then that Ole Miss game. You allow 60% shooting for the Ole Miss Rebels, right? Just a horrendous defensive performance. I'm going with Florida, guys. I think Florida, it's like, what's the lesser of two evils here? Because Florida hadn't been great, but Arkansas has been terrible. Arkansas has been the remedy for everybody who needs a good game. I think the Gators will have that yet again. I think they are much, much better on the defensive side. I think they lock down. And guys, until I see Arkansas show up and win a game, I simply cannot pick the Hogs. But I tell you guys, if the turnaround's going to happen for Muss's team, it better happen sooner rather than later because, you still have time. You got 16 more conference games, but this thing can snowball on you, man. Positive and negative momentum are real things. And Arkansas, it's hard to imagine. It's hard to believe they're staring down the barrel of 0-3 in SEC play, but it's a very, very real thing, guys. We go to the Plains, the 16th ranked Auburn Tigers hosting LSU. Auburn, man, I really hope to one day get to Auburn's arena, by the way. One of the most fun atmospheres in college basketball. I'm going Auburn in this game, guys. I think LSU's been a really, really nice story early, obviously, what Mac McMahon is doing. And, they matched their SEC win total of 2. I mean, that goes to show you how bad last year was for them. They matched their SEC win total with 2. I think Auburn humbles LSU a little bit. I think the Tigers on a roll. We spoke of momentum. They got positive momentum right now. I do think Bruce Pearl's team is ready to go. I think Auburn wins. I think Auburn wins this one big. Lock me in with the Tigers. And finally, guys, Alabama. They go on the road to Mississippi State to take on the Bulldogs. Chris Jan squad. 8:30 p.m. Eastern time tip-off on the SEC Network. This is going to be a fun one. I think this is going to be a really fun one. I'm curious to see Alabama. Are they able to string something together, right? They had their struggles early, looked really, really good in that second half against South Carolina. You got Mississippi State, too, guys, who been a really fun story. Pulls that upset against a top 5 ranked Tennessee team. What Tolu Smith did and others, man. I mean, it's been a lot of fun to watch. I do buy into Nate Oates' team in Alabama. I think they're going to go on the road. I think they get the dub. I think this is one, though, guys, would not surprise me either way. Mississippi State, really good at home. This is a quality Mississippi State is just one of those middle-of-the-pack SEC teams that they're going to bite a lot of people. They're going to bite a lot of people, right? We're talking about who's the fourth best team in the SEC outside of, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Auburn. And, does State maybe start to make a claim? Do you beat Alabama? I think so. I think they can make a claim to be that team. I think Bama is that team, though. I think Bama stays hot shooting the basketball. I think they will get the job done in a really, really tough, gritty win in Starkville.